If Genshin were a PvP game, which characters would be OP, assuming stat checking would be nerfed? Genshin doesn't translate to PvP very well. You'd have to do a lot of changes. I talked about that I think over a year ago, a little bit. Obviously, freeze would inherently break the game, so you'd have to make players either freeze immune, or you'd have to omega nerf freeze duration. Yeah, like obviously, assuming you balance stuff like freeze that just inherently breaks the game, stuff like Zhongli burst that just inherently breaks the game, right? I mean, any character with an insane amount of healing. Well, also assuming that you balance damage, because like the highest HP you can get on a character is like what, 60k or something, 70k with Nilo, and basically every character in the game can do more than that in one single hit. But yeah, assuming you also balance damage so that you can't just fucking one-shot everyone really easily. The healers would just be too broken. And if you don't, then it's just the characters that have more range. Right? Like, Genshin just isn't a game that's balanced for PvP, and I don't think it could be. It only would be broken in PvP. I don't think so. I mean, if his burst can actually petrify people, maybe. I mean, you could iframe it, I guess. I don't know, man. I think Zhongli would be bait. Because his shield is just so much less damage reduction than... Or so much less damage mitigation than healings, or than healers. Noelle would win? I don't know, because Noelle's healing is dependent on her shield not being broken. So once you break her shield, you can kind of just burst her, maybe. But she does build a lot of defense, so maybe you can't. I mean, realistically, Neuvillette would probably be the best character, because he fucking full heals every time he picks up balls. And he can heal a lot while still building damage. Sainto wouldn't be good enough, because you don't have any healing. I mean, maybe if it's like multiple players, if it's not 1v1, Sainto could be good, but meh. Also, melee sucks without gap closers, yeah. I mean, out Venti, yeah, I mean, Venti's also one of those things where, like, it would inherently break the game, so, like, Priest seems to dominate, yeah. Like, there's just too many mechanics in this game that just could not apply well to PvP without being incredibly unbalanced. I think the question of how the meta would change if you could play more than 4 characters, or if co-op was a relevant thing, is a lot more interesting because the game's systems actually work with conditions like that. Would you be open to doing an overall tier list for casual players? Genshin's the first 3D game my partner has played, and they sometimes struggle to manage tracking character movement, camera control, skill cooldowns, and who catches particles. They really love Genshin and often ask me for advice on how to build/play characters or who to wish for. Most advice/TC focus on Spiral Abyss and more skilled play. I'm slowly figuring out with casual TC, but would greatly appreciate any help or insight. As a general rule, characters that are really good for people that are still figuring the game out are characters that don't help you figure the game out. So I don't know if I would really actually recommend them to someone who's actually interested in learning about the game, right? Like, I feel like from your description, I get the feeling that your partner doesn't fit the same, like, definition of a casual as what most people refer to when they talk about casuals, right? They sound like they actually want to learn about the game. So I'm not gonna make a whole tier list, but I can go through some of the characters I would recommend that are relatively simple while helping you learn some of the mechanics. So unironically, I think that mono pyro teams are pretty good at getting an understanding for how energy works. So I'd recommend getting Kazuha. and playing Bennett, Kazuha, Shangling, and then honestly anything on the last slot. It doesn't even have to be a Pyro on-fielder. You can use a more defensive focused character like Zhongli. You can use an Animo unit, a Pyro unit, whatever, right? Other than that, I'm trying to think of Dendro teams that would fit that like definition of being relatively easy to play while still helping you learn about the game. I think with Dendro teams, they're kind of just like things just happen. They're kind of brain dead anyways. But yeah, so I would recommend playing a Hyperbloom team as well, right? So you can. The nice thing about a Hyperloom team like this one, so I would probably recommend going for Yelan and then maybe Raiden, but probably stick to the Kuki if you want a more pleasant experience as someone who doesn't know enemy attack patterns. The nice thing about a team like this is that while there is a character on which you technically should stay for maximum damage, the team does more than enough damage if you're normal attacking on the wrong character. The quote-unquote wrong character. Right? And so, you don't have to worry about rotations, but keeping an eye out for which of your abilities are currently up and which of your abilities aren't is going to increase your damage, right? So, like, eventually you'll notice, like, oh, wait, these seeds are like, I'm generating a bunch of blooms, but I'm not hyper blooming. Oh, that means I should swap to Cookie. And then you swap to Cookie and you start hyper blooming again, right? Oh, I'm not getting any seeds. Oh, okay, let me make sure I swap to my Hydro units, right? Or, oh, I'm triggering Electro Charge. Oh, it's a new wave. I forgot to use Nahida's E, right? I think a team like this, like when it comes to Hyper Bloom variations, I would recommend to someone who wants to like learn. I'd recommend a variation that allows for a lot of swapping, right? That doesn't require a lot of swapping, but that allows for it. Where you don't have one unit that needs to be on field, right? So I wouldn't recommend Kokomi Hyper Bloom or Ayato Hyper Bloom or, I mean, probably even Neuvillette Hyper Bloom. Or even any of the like Electro Carry Hyper Blooms, like Sino or something like that. Because I don't think they're gonna help you as much get a feeling for your cooldowns and stuff like that. So I think Yelan, Nahida are probably good options. They can, if they don't have Nahida yet and Yelan, you can use DMC as a replacement, although it's not going to be as good, but it'll work. And then instead of Yelan, you can kind of just use anything. You can use a defensive option. I remember when Dendro came out, I did a lot of this team, but obviously it would work with Kuki as well. Recommended a similar Burgeon team. I see. Yeah, that makes sense. Although I will say for Burgeon, like if you want to play Toma, I think most of the good Toma teams don't have the best defensive utility options. Although, actually, I guess you could, if you have Baiju, you can do something like this with on-field Baiju. Because I'm not a huge fan of the, like, pure Burgeon Toma teams. I tend to prefer the curry teams and the oven teams. Alright, so either with Fischl or with Kea or Rosaria. This team looks like no damage though. I'm too lazy to gear, man. It's a decent team. So, like doing damage via Burgeon, but they would end up dying. Yeah, that makes sense. Then yeah, like investing into defensive options for Burgeon like Baiju could be pretty nice then. Could also get Kogumi for a team like that, although I'm not as big of a fan of Kogumi for the reason I mentioned earlier. And then, other than that, I already want Baiju, so that should work really well. Alright, Pog. Other than that, it's like there's generally just a lot of like, I mean, in overworld, the damage requirements are obviously going to be a lot lower. I assume when you're referring to overworld, it's not just exploration; it's also like farming domains and basically everything except Abyss. Venti is a lot better in that sort of content. So that he can be a consideration, although I don't think he's anywhere near necessary if they don't like him. Other than that, generally carries that aren't themselves that energy dependent, like Hu Tao, tend to do kind of well, even if you're not very good at Hu Tao cancels. Another favorite is a Kazuha Chongyun Singso freeze team. So yeah, domains, bosses, and quest / exploration, everything other than this, yeah. I mean, yeah. So for a freeze team, obviously you could make it a lot better by getting one of the freeze carries over Chongyun, right? Getting either Ayaka or Risley. I think when it comes to overworld, I'd rather use Risley than Ayaka. Well, that's not even necessarily true. In domains, I feel like I'd rather use Ayaka. Oh, they both have their upsides. They should just go for whichever one they like the most. But yeah, characters like Hu Tao or Yoimiya or Lakino once she's out can be pretty good. Independent carries have been an issue since they got Chao early pity Ito because they like the characters, so I'm able to help them aside from saying use fab weapons. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Chao is a very good overworld character, and you definitely can afford to sacrifice some of his damage for it. Like, I would run an ER Sans and Fav if they like, and the problems are just gonna be fixed. Like, obviously, in a perfect world, you'd run him on a normal weapon with attack Sans, and you generate enough energy with the rest of your team. But like, I mean, hey, I'm assuming there's a chance they don't have Fairs on C6, and they're not all that comfortable with energy batterying yet, so just building more energy recharge is a solution, right? When you don't have a strict timer that you need to clear by, sacrificing a little bit of damage so that the characters feel smoother to play is a completely viable thing to do. Yeah. So hopefully that answered some of your questions. Hopefully that was helpful.